All right, let's dive into one of modern philosophy's most intense and, frankly, most contradictory thinkers, Johann Gottlieb Fichte. This is a guy who took the Enlightenment idea of freedom and just cranked it all the way up to 11. He built this incredible system that champions the power of the individual, but somehow he also helped lay the intellectual groundwork for aggressive nationalism. So how does that happen? Well, to get it, you have to start with the one question that drove his entire life's work. Think about this for a second. This was the question that absolutely tormented the young Fichte. He got completely sideswiped by the idea of determinism. The belief that every single thing that happens is just the result of a long chain of things that happened before it. If that's true, if our universe is just one giant cosmic domino rally, then what happens to our freedom? Is that feeling we have of making our own choices? Is it all just an illusion?
For Fichte, the escape hatch from this crisis came from Immanuel Kant. He saw Kant's work not just as some academic theory, but as a path to personal liberation. He even declared, pretty boldly, that his own system was the first system of freedom. He really believed that just like the French Revolution was breaking literal chains, his philosophy could shatter the mental chains of determinism. This wasn't just an idea for him, it was a mission.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start right where he did, with that crisis of freedom. Then we'll dig into his absolutely radical solution. The idea that our self literally creates the world around us. And from there, we'll see how that one core idea just explodes outward, shaping his views on everything from morality and law to a really bizarre economic plan, and finally, to the fiery speeches that would seal his very, very complicated legacy.
You see, Fichte wasn't the kind of guy who was happy building his ideas on shaky ground or good enough assumptions. Nope, he wanted absolute, undeniable certainty. He was on a quest for a single starting point, a philosophical bedrock so solid that you could logically build all of human knowledge on top of it and no one could ever question it.
And what he came up with was, well, it was audacious. He called it the Wissenschaftslehre, which translates to the science of knowledge. This wasn't just another philosophy book. This was his all-out attempt to construct an entire system of reality from one single truth, and in doing so, to save human freedom once and for all.
The best way to think about the Wissenschaftslehre is like a grand unified theory for philosophy. Fichte's goal was to show that everything, the stars in the sky, the moral choices you make, the very laws of your society, all of it could be logically traced back to one fundamental starting point, the simple act of being aware of yourself.
And that starting point for Fichte is what he calls the I. But, and this is crucial, it's not the I you might be thinking of. It's not a thing, like a soul or a mind or a brain. For Fichte, the I is a verb. It's a pure activity, a constant doing. Before anything else, there is the action of being self-aware. That is the one thing you can't deny. And for Fichte, it's the bedrock of everything.
So how does this one little action create the entire universe? Well, Fichte lays it out in this cool three-step dance. First, the thesis. The I asserts itself. It just is. But wait, to be aware of yourself as a self, you need something that isn't you, right? So the I creates its opposite, the antithesis. It posits a not I. That's the entire external world, everything outside of you. Finally, the synthesis. These two things smash into each other. The I is limited by the world, and the world is understood and shaped by the I. And that dynamic, constant struggle, for Fichte, that isn't just a part of reality. It is reality.
This is my favorite metaphor Fichte uses to explain this. Think about a regular mirror. It just passively reflects whatever you put in front of it. But Fichte says for the I, it's completely different. The mirror itself is the one doing the seeing. It's become an I. In other words, our consciousness doesn't just sit back and take in the world. It's actively out there, creating it in the very act of perceiving it.
Okay, so that's the heavy, mind-bending metaphysics. But what does any of this mean for how we're actually supposed to live our lives? Well, this is where Fichte's philosophy gets intensely practical and starts to build a vision for morality, law, and even the state itself.
And this leads to a pretty demanding idea of what it means to be free. For Fichte, freedom isn't about kicking back and doing whatever you want. No way. It's a moral duty. It's the never-ending project of striving, of pushing back against the not I. That means the outside world, your own limitations, everything. To be a moral person for Fichte is to be in a constant state of struggle and self-overcoming.
But hold on. If everyone is just out there freely striving all the time, wouldn't that just be total chaos? Fichte has an answer for that. He says, look, my freedom only really means something if it's recognized by other free people. And for them to recognize me, I have to recognize them. So we all have to agree to limit our own freedom just enough to not step on anyone else's. That mutual agreement? That's what creates law. And the state? It's basically just the social contract we all sign to make sure everyone plays by the rules.
Okay, and now we start getting into the part of Fichte's career where his ideas get, well, let's just say a lot more radical and controversial. Now that he's got a state, he turns his sights on the economy, and his proposal is, to put it mildly, pretty wild.
So, in the year 1800, right when the world is starting to get really excited about free trade, Fichte publishes a plan for the complete opposite, a closed commercial state. Just imagine this, a country completely sealed off from the rest of the world. The government sets all the prices for everything. All foreign trade is illegal. The country even has its own special currency that's totally worthless anywhere else. The entire goal was total national self-sufficiency, what's called autarky, to protect the nation from the chaos of global markets and war. If you thought his economic plan was extreme, his next major work was pure fire. The addresses to the German nation would become his most famous and his most infamous work. And to really get why it was so explosive, you have to understand exactly when and where he gave them. The timing here is everything. Fichte wasn't giving these speeches in some quiet, cozy university classroom. He delivered them in Berlin during the winter of 1807, a city that was under military occupation by Napoleon's French army. The Prussian army had just been totally crushed. So this wasn't just abstract philosophy. This was an incredible act of political defiance, designed to spark a spirit of resistance in a defeated and humiliated people.
And this is where we see this really dramatic and, for many people, disturbing shift in his thinking. The early Fichte was all about universal ideas. He argued that the whole point of culture was to eventually unite all of humanity. But in the addresses, a very different Fichte shows up. He starts drawing a hard line between Germans and everybody else. He argues that the German people and their language have a unique, superior character and a special destiny in the world.
And this brings us right to the central paradox of Fichte's legacy. How can the same thinker be the ultimate philosopher of the free, self-creating individual, and also a founding father of a collective and exclusionary nationalism? That's the question that makes him so difficult and so important. I mean, really think about that. How does the guy who champions the absolute freedom of the I end up also championing the idea of a superior nation? Is there some hidden logical link between the two ideas? Or did the desperate politics of his time just hijack his philosophy? This is the puzzle that thinkers have been wrestling with for 200 years.
But whether you see him as a hero or a villain, his influence was absolutely massive. The Romantics loved his idea of the world creating self. Hegel took his three-step dialectic and used it to explain all of human history. And even the people who hated his ideas, like Schopenhauer, couldn't ignore him. They had to define their own systems against his, which just goes to show how central he was.
In the end, Fichte's philosophy contains this incredibly explosive duality. On one hand, it gives us a powerful language for talking about radical freedom and self-creation. But that exact same language can be twisted to justify an intense and frankly dangerous collective identity. And it's that tension, that two-sided coin, that makes him one of the most challenging and enduringly relevant thinkers in history.
And so I want to leave you with this final thought. Fichte's most basic idea is that our consciousness isn't just a passive camera recording the world, it's an active artist that paints it. So if he's even a little bit right, if our collective selves really do create the reality we live in, then we aren't just bystanders, we are the authors. And that raises the ultimate question. What responsibility does that put on every single one of us for the kind of world and the kind of nations we choose to build together?